The summer of 1987 settled heavily over West Texas, where the heat seemed to press down on the land like a weight that never lifted. Just outside a small, forgettable town sat the Reeves farm, acres of dry, sunburnt fields stretching endlessly under a pale blue sky. The property itself was simple, a one-story wooden house, a weathered barn, and a few scattered sheds that creaked softly whenever the wind passed through. It wasn't the kind of place people paid much attention to, unless they had a reason. Daniel Reeves was known around town as a hard-working man, the kind who kept to himself but never turned down a favor. He had a slow, measured way of speaking, and people trusted him without quite knowing why. His wife, Martha, was quieter, soft-spoken, always polite, often seen tending to a small garden beside the house. She rarely stayed long in conversations, offering a quick smile before excusing herself, as if she preferred the silence of the farm over the noise of people. Neighbors would occasionally pass by the property, usually noticing the same routine. Daniel fixing a fence line under the burning sun. Martha hanging laundry that swayed gently in the dry breeze. At night, a single porch light glowed against the darkness, visible from the distant road like a lone signal in the vast emptiness. Nothing ever seemed out of place. Nothing ever seemed wrong. But in the weeks leading up to their disappearance, something subtle began to shift, so subtle that no one paid attention at the time. Daniel was seen less frequently in town. When he did appear, he looked distracted, his eyes scanning the ground more than the people around him. Martha stopped tending her garden altogether. The once neat rows of plants began to dry out, curling into brittle shadows of what they had been. On the night they vanished, the farm looked exactly as it always had. The porch light was on. The house stood still against the quiet Texas sky. No sounds of struggle, no sudden disturbance, just the same eerie calm that had settled over the land for years. But sometime between that night and the following morning, something happened, something that left no trace, no warning, and no explanation. By mid-morning the next day, concern had already started to spread. A nearby neighbor, used to seeing Daniel out early working the land, noticed something unusual. The farm was completely still. No movement, no sound, not even the usual creak of the barn door in the wind. When he drove closer, he saw the front door of the house slightly open, swaying just enough to catch his attention. That was when he called the local sheriff. Within an hour, deputies arrived and began a slow, careful search of the property. At first glance, nothing seemed disturbed. The living room was tidy, furniture in place, no signs of forced entry. In the kitchen, a set of dishes sat in the sink, as if someone had planned to wash them later. Martha's purse rested on a chair, untouched. Daniel's boots were positioned neatly by the door. It looked less like a disappearance, and more like life had simply been paused. The officers expanded their search outside, scanning the dry fields that stretched for miles around the farmhouse. Footprints were nearly impossible to track in the hardened soil, and the wind had already erased anything that might have been there. The barn, sheds, and water tanks were checked thoroughly, but there was no indication that anyone had been hiding or taken from the property. No tire tracks suggested a hurried escape. No broken fences hinted at intrusion. As the hours turned into days, more resources were brought in. Search teams walked in lines across the land, covering as much ground as possible. Helicopters flew overhead, their shadows sweeping across the fields as they looked for any sign, clothing, movement, anything that didn't belong. But every search ended the same way, empty-handed. It was as if the Reeves had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the quiet shell of their home. Investigators began questioning locals, hoping someone had seen or heard something unusual. But every answer led nowhere. No strangers had been spotted in the area. No suspicious vehicles were reported. The last confirmed sighting of Daniel and Martha was days before they disappeared, and even then, nothing about their behavior seemed alarming enough to raise concern. With no evidence, no leads, and no clear direction, the case slowly began to lose momentum, slipping further away with each passing day. As months passed and the official investigation faded into silence, something else began to take its place: rumors. At first, they were small, almost insignificant whispers shared between neighbors. People talked quietly at gas stations, in grocery store lines, and over late-night coffee. The Reeves case had no answers, and in a town like this, unanswered questions had a way of turning into stories. One of the earliest rumors came from a rancher whose land bordered the Reeves property. He claimed that, on several nights before the disappearance, he had heard strange sounds coming from across the fields. Not voices, not animals, but something deeper. A low, hollow noise, like metal scraping against dirt, or something moving underground. At the time, he ignored it, blaming it on old pipes or shifting soil. But after Daniel and Martha vanished, those sounds didn't seem so easy to explain. Then there was the story about Daniel himself. A man from town recalled running into him just days before everything happened. According to him, Daniel seemed uneasy, far from his usual calm self. He kept glancing toward the ground as if listening for something no one else could hear. At one point, he reportedly said in a low voice, "There's something under this land, and it's not right." The comment was brushed off as stress or exhaustion. Now, it lingered in people's minds. Others began adding their own pieces to the puzzle. A delivery driver swore he had seen lights flickering near the back of the Reeves property late one night, far from the house, where no electricity should have reached. Another neighbor mentioned that Martha had stopped coming into town altogether in the weeks before the disappearance, as if she was avoiding something or someone. None of these details were confirmed, but together, they painted a picture that felt increasingly unsettling. Over time, the stories grew darker, more detailed, and harder to ignore. Some believed the land itself held a secret, something buried long before the Reeves ever arrived. Others thought Daniel had discovered something he wasn't supposed to find. But without proof, the rumors remained just that, stories passed down and reshaped with each telling. Still, one thing became clear in the minds of those who remembered. Whatever happened on that farm didn't start the night Daniel and Martha disappeared. It had been building long before that. For nearly 4 decades, the Reeves farm sat abandoned, slowly surrendering to time and the harsh Texas elements. The wooden house faded under the relentless sun, its paint peeling away in thin, curling strips. The barn leaned slightly to one side, as if exhausted from standing too long without purpose. Locals avoided the property whenever possible. Some said it felt wrong to even drive past it at night, like the land itself carried a memory that refused to fade. In early 2025, a man named Caleb Turner decided to buy the land. He wasn't from the area, which meant the old stories didn't carry much weight for him. To Caleb, it was just a cheap piece of property with potential, a fixer-upper he could turn into something profitable. When townspeople warned him about the place, he brushed it off with a quiet laugh, more focused on renovation plans than decades-old rumors. Caleb started with the exterior, clearing overgrown brush and hauling away debris that had piled up over the years. The work was slow but steady. Each day revealed more of what the farm used to be, buried beneath neglect. But as he moved toward the smaller structures behind the house, he noticed something odd about one of the old storage sheds. It looked ordinary from the outside, but inside, the air felt strangely cooler, heavier, like it had been sealed off from time itself. While clearing out broken tools and rotted wood, Caleb stepped across a section of the floor that gave off a dull, hollow sound beneath his boots. He paused, stepping back and pressing his foot down again. The same sound echoed upward, subtle, but unmistakable. It didn't match the rest of the solid ground. Curious, he dragged a rusted cabinet aside and crouched down, running his hand over the wooden planks. They were worn, but one section seemed slightly different, almost as if it had been placed there later. Unable to ignore the feeling, Caleb grabbed a crowbar and wedged it between the boards. The wood resisted at first, then gave way with a sharp crack that echoed through the shed. One by one, he pried the planks loose, revealing something hidden beneath. As the final board came up, the light shifted just enough to expose it, a rusted metal surface, dull and cold, with a faint outline of a handle barely visible under years of dust. The metal hatch beneath the shed was unlike anything Caleb had expected to find. It was heavy, covered in rust, and bolted down with thick iron screws that had clearly been in place for decades. The moment his hand brushed against the cold surface, a shiver ran up his spine. The air escaping from the tiny gaps was stale and damp, carrying a smell of earth and something older, almost metallic. It was clear this wasn't just a storage space. It had been built to conceal something, or someone. After struggling for what felt like hours, Caleb finally managed to loosen the bolts and lift the hatch. A wave of cold, suffocating air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of mold and decay. He hesitated at the edge, staring into the darkness that yawned below him. A narrow tunnel stretched downward, reinforced with wooden beams that had warped over time but remained sturdy. The passage was long, winding, and completely unseen from the surface, undocumented and unmarked, hidden beneath the farm for decades. The first step into the tunnel sent dust motes swirling in the beam of Caleb's flashlight. Each step echoed ominously against the wooden walls, and the farther he went, the colder it became. The construction was meticulous, nails set precisely, beams aligned perfectly, suggesting that whoever built it had done so with care and purpose. This wasn't an abandoned mine or a forgotten cellar. It was deliberate. Someone had wanted this tunnel to remain secret, and it had succeeded for nearly 40 years. As Caleb ventured deeper, he noticed small signs of human activity. Old tools abandoned along the sides, footprints faintly pressed into the dirt floor, and scraps of cloth that had long since dried and disintegrated. It was as if someone had used the tunnel, then left in a hurry, leaving traces behind that time had only partially erased. The further he went, the more it became clear that this wasn't a simple passageway. It was a hidden network, possibly stretching under the entire property. At one point, the tunnel split into smaller passageways, branching off into shadowed corridors that disappeared into darkness. Caleb's flashlight flickered as he tried to peer down one of the side tunnels, revealing only more wooden beams, packed dirt walls, and the oppressive sense of being watched by the silence itself. Every instinct screamed that this place held secrets far beyond a simple hidden hatch. And as he reached what appeared to be a larger chamber ahead, a deep unease settled in his chest. This was only the beginning of a discovery that would shake the quiet town to its core. Authorities were called in immediately after Caleb's discovery, and the tunnel was cordoned off while a team of investigators geared up to explore it safely. Equipped with high-powered flashlights, helmets, and cameras, they descended carefully into the narrow, musty corridor. The smell of damp earth and mold was overpowering, and each footstep echoed eerily off the wooden supports. It was clear from the start that this was no ordinary tunnel. Its construction suggested deliberate intent, as if someone had spent weeks, maybe months, creating a hidden labyrinth beneath the Reeves farm. The main tunnel stretched farther than anyone had anticipated. Investigators noted side passages, some barely wide enough for a single person to squeeze through. Every corridor was reinforced with rotting wooden beams, and old ropes and metal hooks suggested that someone had been using the tunnel regularly, though long ago. Amid the darkness, small remnants of life were scattered. A rusted lantern hanging from a hook, a few wooden crates stacked haphazardly, and a small pile of dried clothing that had decayed over decades. Each discovery raised more questions than it answered. When the team reached what appeared to be a central chamber, they found something chilling. 2 skeletal remains lay partially covered in debris, positioned as if the occupants had tried to hide or rest. Forensic examination later confirmed the remains belonged to Daniel and Martha Reeves. But the way the bodies were arranged suggested something unnatural. Neither skeleton showed signs of a struggle or defensive wounds. It was as though the couple had been trapped, waiting for something, or someone, that never came. Even more disturbing were the walls themselves. Scratched into the dirt and wood were frantic marks, symbols, and lines, some appearing almost ritualistic. The same repeated message could be clearly deciphered: "Don't open it." The investigators couldn't determine whether the Reeves themselves had carved the warnings or if someone, or something else, had left them. Whatever had been hidden in the tunnel was feared enough to elicit a warning desperate enough to be literally etched into the walls. The chamber contained more than just the remains and the warnings. Old, broken tools, scattered papers, and a few personal items hinted at a life continued underground for some time. Evidence suggested Daniel and Martha had been alive in this hidden space for days, maybe weeks, after they vanished. Their disappearance was not instantaneous. They had tried to survive, to leave clues, or perhaps to escape. But something unseen, had prevented them from leaving, or from being found, until decades later. Even after discovering Daniel and Martha Reeves' remains, the tunnel continued to hold secrets that sent chills through the investigators. Forensic reports confirmed that the couple had survived for days, maybe even weeks, underground before their deaths. They had attempted to move through the tunnels, leaving footprints and faint traces of cloth as they tried to navigate the labyrinth. But the further they went, the more it became clear that the Reeves had encountered something beyond their understanding, something that kept them trapped in the darkness until the very end. At the far end of the tunnel system, hidden behind a wall of collapsed wooden beams, the team discovered another door. Unlike the rusted hatch at the entrance, this door was reinforced with thick metal and appeared to have been locked from the inside. The investigators couldn't determine how long it had been sealed, but judging by the dust, cobwebs, and decay, it had been untouched for decades. Whoever, or whatever, had built this underground maze had gone to great lengths to conceal this section, and it became immediately clear that this door was the epicenter of the mystery. Investigators noted strange markings near the hidden door, carved symbols, some resembling letters, others abstract scratches that seemed almost alive under the flashlight's glare. The air around the chamber was colder, heavier, and carried a faint metallic odor that seemed almost unnatural. Every member of the team felt it, an oppressive weight, as if the tunnel itself was warning them to leave. Cameras and audio equipment recorded static and faint whispers that no one could explain, though some speculated it was the acoustics of the tunnel. Others felt it was something more sinister, something that had lingered in the darkness for decades. What made the discovery even more unnerving was the realization that the Reeves' disappearance may have been only part of the story. The tunnel's structure suggested it had been used multiple times, perhaps even before Daniel and Martha arrived. Investigators speculated that the underground network might hide other secrets, other people who had vanished, or something far darker. The reinforced door hinted at an unknown force or entity deliberately kept hidden from the surface world, a terrifying presence that had remained dormant yet watched over the tunnels all those years. The final twist came when a small, faded diary page was found tucked into a crevice near the door. The writing was almost illegible, but one line stood out, scrawled in frantic handwriting. Once opened, it cannot be closed, and it waits. The implication was bone-chilling. Whatever lay beyond that hidden door had been the reason Daniel and Martha never escaped. It was clear the tunnel was more than a secret passage. It was a trap, a prison, and possibly a warning for anyone foolish enough to uncover what had been buried under the Reeves farm for 38 long years. As investigators stepped back from the tunnel, the weight of the discovery pressed down on everyone present. Daniel and Martha Reeves' story had finally been partially revealed, but the hidden door at the far end remained untouched, its secrets locked away for reasons no one could fully understand. For decades, the farm had kept its silent vigil, hiding the truth beneath layers of soil, wood, and darkness. The town may never know what truly lay behind that reinforced door. Some whispers suggest that certain mysteries are meant to stay buried, that some doors, once built, are never meant to be opened. And yet, the Reeves' disappearance reminds us all how fragile our understanding of reality can be, and how the past sometimes refuses to stay buried. 38 years after a quiet Texas couple vanished, a hidden tunnel offered answers, and raised far more questions. What lies behind the final door? Why were they trapped? And what, if anything, still waits beneath the Reeves farm, watching, patient, and unseen? For now, the truth remains partially hidden, and the tunnel stands as a chilling reminder. Some secrets refuse to be forgotten, and some doors are best left closed.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.